Hi, welcome to Lean Blog Interviews. I'm your host, Mark Rabin. Today we have two guests joining us together. They are Thomas Cox and Andre Demarchand. We're going to have a conversation together about things they have been thinking about that I think are going to be really interesting to you about preconditions for lean and why lean implementations often struggle or don't stick. So that's what we're talking and digging into today. Thomas Cox is a self described management bench builder and co founder of the Transformative Leadership Lab. He spent 25 plus years coaching the people who manage other managers. Tom, and I think this is meaningful to a lot of listeners, I know it is to me, is a certified Parada method coach trainer, the approach that the late Norman Bodek to be less. We talked about that, Norm and I, if you want to hear more about that back in episode 176. So before I introduce Andre, Thomas, thanks for being here. How are you?
Thank you.
Doing well today?
I am trying not to show the excitement I have within me about talking about this with you in front of your audience. I think this is a tremendous topic, feels tremendously important to me.
No need to hold back that enthusiasm. And somebody I know won't be holding back his enthusiasm is a returning guest, Andre Demarchand. He was a guest episode 307. The theme there, among other things, was about you can't cut your way to success. So I invite you to go check out that episode if you want to hear that discussion. Andre is president of Demarchand Healthcare Solutions Inc. I'll describe you kind of informally as a former Toyota guy from Canada. I mean, you're more than that, but is that fair, Andre?
Yeah, I think that's a very fair, Mark. It's great to see you again. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you've been doing a lot of work in healthcare over time. So, there's going to be a lot of, I think that we're going to be talking about different industries and I think common themes, common challenges. But as we've come to do, and Andre, this is new since your appearance, I'm going to ask you to go first. I always love to hear, what's your lean origin story? Or I'm guessing, is it a TPS origin story?
My introduction to Lean, Mark, came from the time that I spent at the Toyota motor manufacturing plant in Canada. I was hired there as part of the first 100 that were hired. It was a greenfield plant. Had no idea about Lean, had no idea how to build a car to save my life, although I was a bit of a car nut. And so my introduction there was I'm not sure that I really understood what I was getting into and what I was going to learn going into that environment. What really struck me and resonated with me as I was there was how Lean, first of all, this isn't just marketing. Lean is about engaging everybody and about engaging everybody's brain and intelligence to make things better for the next person down the line, whether that's the customer or the next person that you're serving. And quite frankly, I didn't believe that when I first got there, but because I came from an industry that was always total chaos. I came from the meatpacking industry, and we would sit in the management meetings and we would talk about how well things were going. Meanwhile, when you walk outside of the meeting, it is total chaos. Nobody really understood what was going. There was no standards for anything. There was no standard work. And quite frequently, deadlines were missed. Things were shipped incorrectly, et cetera, et cetera. And you contrast that with Lean, which, I'm hesitant to say it's prescriptive, but it does have very clear pathways that you should follow. And it actually, while it does sound restrictive when you try to talk to somebody about it, it actually frees up a lot of your mind space to be able to think about not just how to make things better, but the meaning of the work that you're doing and how to make things more valuable and more value added for whoever your customer is in there. It sounds like I really drank the Kool-Aid. It really took me a number of months to get there, but certainly once I was there, it's like, I don't know that I would want to work in another environment that didn't have this in it, because I'm not sure I could endure that kind of chaos and lack of understanding about what's going on.
Yeah. Well, you answered a question I was going to ask as a follow-up of how long did it take you to come to believe it? But I would like to dig into that just a little bit of like going from hearing the words of, yeah, that sounds great, but I'm skeptical, Like, was it gradual? Was there a certain moment where you realized, okay, there wasn't the gap you expected between words and action?
Yeah, there was a specific moment that made me realize that this is really a serious business and that lean is for real. It's not just some kind of window dressing that we put on something. And that happened at a manufacturing meeting. And you would go to a manufacturing meeting at the meatpacking plant, and we would go around the table. Hey, how's things going? You got any problems? Anything go? Nope, everything's good. Everything's good, right? Everything's good. If you brought up a problem there, you would be probably the biggest idiot in that room. And yet you could walk outside that room and realize that things were not going well.
Yeah.
Contrast that with this one moment I had at Toyota when I first started joining the manufacturing meeting. And you'd go around the room and, "Are there any problems?" Everybody had a problem they were bringing to the table. And
Mhm.
if you did not have a problem, you would be seen as the idiot. Not that anybody would say that out loud, but you would be seen as the idiot because you did not understand how your business was working, because every business has problems every day. And so to show up at a manufacturing meeting where the purpose was to understand the state of affairs, be able to move things forward, be able to solve problems together as a group, you can't show up not having a problem of some kind. And so that moment, that very first meeting, and I'm honest, I showed up without a problem. And it became very apparent that I was not behaving properly in that room. That never happened again. And that really resonated with me and made me realize these people are serious about how this is supposed to work.
I need to ask a question, Andre.
Sure.
When you made the faux pas of not having the problem when everyone else had the problem, were you blamed, shamed, and criticized for that?
No, not at all. It was acknowledged that I was new to the meeting and that I could probably learn from some of my peers is some of the content to bring. And if I had any questions, please reach out to anybody in that room, including the executive vice president. There was no pressure, none of this. Wow, what a dumb guy to show up without a problem. It was about helping me understand the process and come back better prepared the next time. It was a development opportunity, and that's how it was seen.
I mean, that sounds like a living example of no problems is a problem. It's a problem that Andre didn't bring a problem to the meeting, but
Yeah.
as the corollary, as you brought up, Thomas, the problem is an opportunity to learn as opposed to something that you chastise, browbeat, shame over.
Yeah, a fix blame for the problem in order to deflect it from oneself.
Yeah.
It's not my fault. It's your fault. It's nobody's fault. It's an opportunity.
Yes, right. It's there. The problem is there. The gap is there, right?
Yeah, that was my first understanding that pretty much anything could be turned into a teachable moment with the right approach.
Final question before we'll turn to Thomas and your quality story. What role did you get hired in as there at Toyota?
Oh, I was hired actually as a forklift driver when I started at Toyota, and then just graduated through the ranks to become manufacturing manager responsible for stamping shop. Again, development opportunities, even, when my career at Toyota ended, they were in the process of preparing me for the next level. Development, helping people get to the next step in their career was always a big item at Toyota, as well as, it does support the continuity of the business and sustain to have a really sound succession plan. Had the opportunity to see lean from a lot of different aspects.
Yeah. And that there are so many people that had that progression from team member up into various ranks of formal leadership roles, and Toyota develops people. And, you compare that to other companies. Not to jump ahead too far in the A3, but that idea of developing people from within seems to be a missing precondition in a lot of organizations. And it goes beyond just say, okay, well, Toyota, non-union environment. So it's not a matter of union versus management, but when there is a union environment, I've been reading about Ford recently, like choose to progress up into their team member, and they have an opportunity. And if they're going to progress, they have to leave the union and they leave these protections. And Ford did, like, when I started at GM 30 years ago, you hire in the young whippersnapper engineer to be that supervisor instead of progressing up through the ranks. That just seems like the differences there would really compound greatly.
Yeah, and not being able to develop people from within your own ranks, I mean, that risks the DNA of your organization because you are continuously bringing in DNA from outside the organization. And to be able to develop that strong culture and make sure that the DNA of the organization lives on and that each generation of leadership builds on the strengths of the last one,
Mm.
it's pretty hard to do if you're not also replicating the culture that's inside the organization to begin with.
So, Thomas, I'd love to hear your origin story. It might be framed a little bit differently as
Very.
quality origin story, or I'll let you
I
frame.
think so. Yeah. Many decades ago, I read Peter Senge's Fifth Discipline and was just galvanized by it and started trying to see systems and trying to see ways to improve things in a systematic way. And might have been right before or after that, I got exposed in my engineering past as a software guy, database architect, when I started encouraging my peers to try out extreme programming, which is a precursor to agile and so forth. And that was all really cool and got very little traction, which was frustrating, but I never lost my taste for it. And when I switched in 2002 into management consulting and leadership training, after about 13 years in database architecture, I brought that with me. And about 2013, I think I got to show up at a Lean Portland event, which is Portland, Oregon has a Lean community of practitioners who get together periodically, and Andre's been there. And I was at one of the early meetings and helped kick it off, and then promptly dropped out and did other things for a while. But that really whetted my appetite. And at one key point, I started thinking about how do I use the Toyota production system as I understood it from the outside and use it to inform how managers manage and how leaders lead. And for some reason, I got on the topic of performance improvement plans and sort of like telling someone that they were, they needed to shape up or ship out.
You mean, the disciplinary.
The disciplinary, like you're on formal notice that if you don't improve your performance in 90 days, you'll be fired. And so many of those are so terribly done. And but I wanted to take a Toyota style, or what I imagined or hoped to be a Toyota style to it. And what I ended up writing was like 95% of what had to happen was the manager needed to get clear on what quality was in the job, what skills and abilities the person needed to have to be able to do it well. Did they have the tools? Did they have the training, the supplies, the inputs? It became a very long list very quickly of, is management sure that this person is capable of delivering quality? And in many cases, they haven't. And only after you've exhausted it, then I flip the page and it's like, okay, now next page. If they don't have the skill, did we select for that skill? Is the skill trainable and did we just not train it? And it's like, oh my gosh. And so by the time you're done, it's like, if a worker's not working out, it's like 95% management's fault because they picked them. They put them in the role. They either trained them or didn't. They gave them the supplies or they didn't. On and on and on. And if you haven't taken the time to really inspect management's 95% of it, to blame the worker for their 5% through a PIP felt premature. And I actually turned that into a product that I took to market for a little while. I call it the ethical PIP. And it was actually had several instances where I got hired to either help create the PIP and or help coach the executive to succeed on it. And that really helped me feel like I had my feet on the ground in terms of what management needs to do to make it possible for workers to succeed.
Right.
And after I got done out of my system and I felt really good about it, I turned around and said, hey, wait a second. Instead of looking at the worker and saying, how did this worker succeed? What about managers? Who's got that same setup for the manager? What's the manager's output?
Are we
their tool inputs?
when they quote unquote say?
Yeah. And you take it on up and you go up to the C-suite. And that's how we got to the A3 that we're here to talk about today, which is the preconditions of lean. Because as I'm reading Deming and I'm reading some of the old early stuff on lean, and he would say, get rid of slogans. And then he would say, don't do X, or, get rid of fear, substitute leadership. Mm-hmm. And everywhere I could find, it's like, okay, what does that mean? And at no point does he actually say what he means by that.
Yeah.
It's a slogan.
Right.
And it occurs to me that if you can't blame Joe on the manufacturing line for not putting the bumper on correctly, unless you've made very sure that he's got a bumper installation process that's pretty flawless. But we turn right around and blame management for not installing lean correctly. And our explanations are things like, well, you didn't establish a lean culture. Okay, you're going to say, well, you don't have a bumper installation culture? I mean, come on.
That's a good definition, right? You don't have a lean culture because you didn't install a lean.
Yeah. And so we can't, if we can't do finger point and blame to resolve things for frontline workers, why can we do it for management or for executive leadership?
Yeah, and everybody works as part of a system.
And what lean doesn't have, I would claim, is it doesn't have an installation system. It doesn't have, I claim,
your measures here, or you jump to the countermeasures? No.
Maybe. Well, let's just say that I'm noticing there isn't. I'm noticing lean doesn't install cleanly and well reliably.
Sure.
And if a bumper was installed badly 70% of the time, you'd go, there's a problem with our installation process. But lean seems to struggle a lot more than it succeeds, which for a problem-solving methodology is a bad sign.
Sure.
It seems to me.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned Dr. Deming Thomas, because you were making me think of him when you talked about the role of leaders. Deming, I think one of his expressions was the role, I'm going to paraphrase it. Role of a leader is not to judge, but is to help people succeed.
Yes.
So you compare like the once clear annual review you're being done versus, I think part of the substitute leadership is what are you doing every day to help somebody succeed? And, the other thing, I think about PIP is the cynicism that understandably builds when people say, it's not about improving performance. PIP is the documentation so we could fire the person
without getting sued.
What do you know statistics? I wonder about what percentage people on a PIP actually survive and are allowed to improve.
It is completely variable on the industry and on the individual company. But I can say with confidence that I have a track record of getting people to beat their PIPs, in part because the very first thing we do is examine the thing and discover how badly it's written, and we negotiate a better one that's actually well-defined and sets them up for success. And then we do the work to actually help them succeed, which, by the way, improves the entire organization. Because if the organization isn't providing Fred or Janet with what they need to succeed, what are the odds they're not doing that? They're letting other people down too, pretty high.
Well, let's talk about this A3. So I know you and Andre have been, thinking and talking and I think writing about this a lot. And when we got together to talk about how do we want to structure the episode here, I don't know, we kind of fell into, it seemed natural. Well, let's structure it like a verbal A3. You've created version X of an A3. I'm almost willing to should I give the reins to you, Thomas, or to Andre? Like I'm always happy to be kind of a bit of a spectator and like not to necessarily read A3, but we have this scripted out. How should we go through this A3?
Well, I want to start by giving credit to my business partner, Jim Prinzing, who's not on the call, but we got very excited by the A3. He's from outside of the lean tradition entirely. And I've not seen him this excited, I think, in years. If ever, to see the A3 as a problem-solving tool was a delight, and he got very into it. And so between Andre's contributions and Jim's and mine, we created, I think, a very good description of this problem of getting lean implementations to stick. I think let's see if we can frame the problem statement up for the listener or the viewer. So we know lean works. We know that lean doesn't install cleanly, reliably, as often as we'd like it to. So try this on for problem statement. Lean requires people to surface problems and admit mistakes, stop the line, all of that without fear, which in turn requires psychological safety, as we know. But psychological safety has to be a precondition, not provided by lean. It has to be there before lean gets rolled out and as it's being installed. And as it turns out, we've got very good research that says that most humans, and especially leaders, will default to, when they're under pressure, which happens a lot in business, they'll default to something that Chris Argyris referred to as Model 1. And model 1 is controlling, self-protective, blame-oriented, and closed off from learning, which is, I believe you'll find that is the exact opposite of lean. And so I've got this methodology going to be installed, but the people at the top who are outside of that and responsible for its installation and success have inside of them, by default, according to multiple sources of research, a way of responding to pressure that is inherently anti-lean, controlling, self-protective, blame-oriented, closed off. It's the default state of humans under stress, which means if we're going to install lean successfully, we're going to have to address that thing, that model 1 behavior at the executive level.
Yeah.
That's the base of the problem statement as we've formulated. And the opposite thing that Argyris described is model.
Plug that a little bit here.
Yeah. I want to make sure we know what the two models are, so we know what we broke.
Okay.
So if model 1 is controlling, self-protective, blame-oriented, closed off, and I think we've all experienced a senior leader who's like that at least some of the time at some point in our careers. There's also model 2 of being calm, curious, empathic, non-defensive, willing to share. It's like, I wonder what the answer might be, as opposed to, I know what the answer is, and we're going to talk until you see it my way. And so this model 2, positive opposite of model 1 that Argyris described, is the operating mode that the executives have to be in the vast majority of the time if they're going to make lean install and persist, we believe. That's the claim. Proboacer.
Well, what? Or so the model 1 behaviors would hurt people's sense of psychological safety.
It would crush it.
People would learn to not speak up. Model 2 sounds like those behaviors are more likely to build psychological safety. So trying to think of a question. I don't want to jump to countermeasure.
I think we can illustrate model 2 with Andre's story of showing up without a problem.
Right.
And he was met with calm, empathic curiosity.
Yes.
There's no blaming, no judging, no criticism. No one was controlling, like, okay, now I need you to come up with a problem right now.
Yeah. I was swimming in a sea of model 1 behavior at General Motors. At first year there, it was bad. But, how often, I guess the question I wanted to ask is, how often will senior leaders agree with that problem statement and that gap as something to work on, as opposed to, oh, hey, no, come in and fix my people, or cycle times are too long, or defects are too high. No, that's the real problem.
Well, I think part of the problem, Mark, is that at the earliest engagement, when you're going to work on a transformation with an organization, we talked that the organizations need a couple of things. They need to have a burning platform for change, and they need to have leadership commitment. But in those early days, we don't really talk about what that leadership engagement or commitment actually is. And so then the default position becomes, yeah, I know this lean stuff's going to go on and I support that, again, without defining what support means. And, the conversations I've had with Thomas have led us to believe that while most of the transformation installation pieces are actually effective, that miss at the beginning of making sure that those technically responsible for leading the work, the executive leadership, making sure that they understand what kind of commitment they're signing up for, that's a big miss. That's where an opportunity sits, where we really haven't fleshed it out, where we've just said, hey, is the leadership engaged? Oh yeah, they're engaged. They're talking about it. They're letting everybody else. Yeah, they're letting everybody else do it without actually understanding, holy cow, the way I behave, the work I have to do has to change as well. And it's more than just the simplicity of standard work. It's the mental models that they use and how they apply them on a day-to-day basis.
If you're up for a vignette, like an illustration, if you will.
Sure.
So apparently when Mulally went to Ford was in deep trouble, and he comes in, and one of the first things he does in his C-suite meetings is he bans sarcasm. And I read that, and I thought, you are kidding.
Heard that one yet? Sorry. Yeah, he banned sarcasm.
He banned sarcasm, and he's telling his people, look, You can't be telling me that everything's green and we're hemorrhaging $1 billion a month. Come on, we got to talk about the reality here. And finally, this one guy, Mark Fields, the first guy to step up, said, and he later, he wrote in his journal that he kind of expected to get fired that day, but he reported red. And Mulally said, and started applauding. He's like, yes, this is excellent. Okay, everybody, Mark isn't the problem. Mark has a problem. What can we each do to help Mark?
Yeah. His program was behind schedule, and so it wasn't green.
And everyone's getting the, so culture is created by what the person with more power than you pays attention to and how they behave.
Yeah.
And what this new guy, what Mulally is doing is saying, if you report red, I will applaud you and I will help mobilize resources to support you.
Yeah. That reminds
as opposed to the prior administration. Clearly, you would be seen as an incompetent, and it was a career-limiting move to admit out loud in public that you had a problem, which is, I think, the opposite of lean, which is where we talk about problems openly. So it starts at the top.
Yeah. And you know what, the way you're telling that there, I've heard everything about nobody was reporting anything other than green. Mark Fields was the first to do it. Mulally applauded. Fields ended up being his replacement as CEO.
Years later. But what happened in the weeks after that is everybody started reporting yellow and red. And they were started having constructive conversations. So now if I come in, I won't be defenestrated. I won't be like thrown out the window if I report something other than green. And I'll get help. Holy heck. And so what he created in microcosm is exactly what we're trying to create on the front line with lean in the first place, is we bring up problems so we can solve them together. Duh.
Yeah. Well, and the part of the story is you're told that if Fields was really afraid to speak up, I mean, Mulally had been encouraging them to speak up, and he still felt fear. That reminds me of your experience, Andre, at Toyota, that it took you a while to realize, okay, they really meant the things they were telling. It's understandable that you might not, believe without evidence.
Well, exactly. I mean, when you come from an industry that is not structured that way, that doesn't have that culture, and you hear that for the first, I would say few times, acknowledging that I'm a bit of a slow learner, you're just kind of waiting for the punchline, right? You're waiting for the shoe to fall where somebody goes, I knew you were incompetent, and when it doesn't come, it takes a few cycles of that before you can actually believe what's going on. We talk a lot, especially around lead, we talk a lot about culture. What is culture? How do you drive culture? Culture is basically a bunch of people who are exhibiting more or less the same kinds of behaviors. But what a lot of people don't realize is I cannot influence behaviors directly, right? Because I only have a carrot or a stick. I can make Thomas do something if I dangle a carrot, or I can whack him with a stick. But as you know, Mark, the Japanese have a saying, when the donkey is full or the donkey is hurt, the donkey stops walking. Meaning if it's had too many carrots or been hit too many times, it's not going to do anything. So the thing that actually drives the behaviors is giving people a different experience to what they're used to. The different experience changes the behaviors, which ultimately, when you get a force of numbers behind that, will change your culture. And a lot of people don't understand the mechanism by which that works.
Yeah. Quick detour. I'm going to indulge myself as the host. Like, you dig into the carrot or the stick, is the way you described it. You're feeding the donkey or you're hitting the donkey. I've read the original phrase really was the carrot and the stick, because the stick is what you use to dangle the carrot out in front of the donkey. And I've never really been around a donkey, but if you hit a donkey, it locks its legs, and you can't hit the donkey and make it move forward. So somehow that whole weird analogy, and why are we comparing people to donkeys anyway? It's just a weird history around that.
And I think it speaks to both the fear that the person in charge has, that if I don't make something happen, bad things will happen to me. I must now try to make people do what I need them to do with carrots and sticks, rather than whatever the longer road is of understanding how people work internally and in partnering with them, finding hey, what makes you feel fulfilled at work? Would you like to help co-create some success here?
Yeah.
Share authorship.
that model one that you're describing, I have to make people do something through rewards or punishment, right? That seems very much that model
Controlling,
one.
controlling, protective, blame-oriented, and closed.
And I mean, it
For-
seems to map maybe not perfectly to a different framework of Douglas McGregor's theory X versus theory Y. Theory X is like, oh, left to our own devices, we'll be lazy and sit and do nothing. Therefore, you have to motivate people, as opposed to theory Y, which is more like the Deming approach of, realizing people want to do good work. They have intrinsic motivation. If you hired people who don't want to work, there's that system problem. Why are you making bad hiring decisions? System problem. People, it's easier to blame individuals. Sure. That's a common cause.
I have to share I believe this is probably copyrighted, but it's funny, so they call it fair use. This is a screen grab from a Weird Al Yankovic music video.
Parodies about.
Yeah,
We're providing
Connect.
commentary to it. I think it's
but it's we got the guy on the treadmill and with a carrot being dangled in front of him, and a guy in a suit with a gun right behind him, and the guy is both dangling the carrot and threatening him from behind. So he is incentivized.
yeah. And he's running in flux.
And he's running, like going nowhere, running, sweating. Yeah. It's one of those lovely little images that captures so much of what we all hate.
Yeah. I forget the Weird Al song is all about corporate buzzwords, and it's in the
Yes.
style of Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. I forget.
That's the one. Well, the one. I'll have to go find it. But yes.
Do we want to talk about causal analysis? I mean, you frame problem statement and a gap in some of the current condition. Is this, I was kind of picturing like, my gosh, this is probably a very big fishbone diagram. Or I'm curious how much discussion the two of you have had about all of the different potential causes, and is that what we agree? It looks like you sort of narrowed the problem into a particular sub problem that you dug into. Is that?
I would say that it was our root cause analysis currently on the A3 section 4 is probably about a week of back and forth, mostly Jim and me, and Andre, of course, contributed. And I don't recall him correcting us, so I think he must have been okay with what we ended up with. That when lean is failing, it's because people at the front line aren't doing lean. They aren't reporting problems. They aren't stopping the line. And number two, because it ain't safe. They don't feel safe. And they don't feel safe because there's at least intermittent punishment. Doesn't have to be every time, but even 1 out of 5 is too many. If I occasionally get smacked around, it doesn't take very many of those to make me shift my behavior. And so intermittent punishment is going to come from people above you falling into this model one pattern of controlling, self-protective, blame-oriented, and closed behavior. That's the definition. Okay. And if that's happening even occasionally, the only cause I can think of for that, and I'm open to more, but this is why we publish A3s, is to get more people thinking about it, is executives haven't got a method for putting themselves into Model 2 and staying there routinely as a matter of course, and helping each other get back into Model 2 when they drift out, as they will from time to time. And really reinforcing.
Is it worthwhile? Maybe is this a section where it might be helpful to literally read through all of those whys?
I think I kind of paraphrased them, but yeah. Why one, frontline workers stop surfacing problems. Because why two, experience teaches them it's not safe. They're having career costs, scrutiny, blame, dimmed future prospects, whatever. The risk is too high. So why is that? The risk is too high because there's at least intermittent punishment. Why is there intermittent punishment? It's because the people above them, the executives ultimately who set the tone, are blame-oriented, defensive, and self-protective at least some of the time, because only a blame-oriented or defensive or self-protective person would punish anybody or engage in a behavior that felt punishing when they surfaced a problem.
Yeah. Now, and a lot of these, so then the answer to that, why are those executives that way? I had a conversation as I was leaving GM and I had less to hear. I asked the number 2 in our plant, after he was putting on a show, chewing out one of the area managers over speakerphone when another IE we were in the office and it was not like, I mean, this was his typical behavior, you know, and I finally sort of asked him like at least one why. Like help me understand why that was what you chose to do to the area manager about that situation. And he basically traced it back to like, well, that's how we are here. My boss yells at me. His boss yelled at him, blah, blah, blah. Like he blamed the board of directors. That's the way it's always been here at General Motors.
There you go.
I'm not saying that's a constructive, like,
It's almost certainly a subjectively accurate summary. And by the way, I was listening to Andre relate one of his stories about Kimberly-Clark, where they tried to do lean organization-wide, and it survived only in pockets, and those pockets were defined by geographically separate plants with a top person who was able to protect the people below them. And so that when the chain of yelling hits that person, they didn't pass it down.
cycle of blame.
And they had people responsibility and enough power to deflect that.
Well, and then I think at some point, you know, that plant where they've created that protective culture, that protected culture, is going to perform better. And then the ones up above might leave that plant alone because they're busy.
Or feel threatened by it and come and attack it. Because remember, if the person above is sufficiently blame-oriented, defensive, and self-protective, they might feel a high level of confidence in somebody else is a threat to them. It's stupid, but it happens. And people sub-optimize all the time.
It's a whole different dynamic.
It's all Model 1, baby.
Oh, yeah. Talk us through the next why. I took it down a branch that might be accurate. Bring us down a path where it might then lead to a countermeasure.
So you would have to find a way to engage this executive team, CEO, maybe the board, and the rest of the C-suite would have to go along with this, that we're all going to learn how to get ourselves into the brain chemistry and the brain configuration of calm, curious empathy as our routine stance. And we're going to actually learn physical things to do, practices that make that occur, because you can't think your way into that. You have to practice your way into it. Mm-hmm. There's some neuroplastic change that you have to undergo. And then we're going to have to agree as a group that we're all going to keep doing that moving forward. And even further than that, we're going to say, and when one of us falls out because we're having a bad day, the default for humans under stress is Model 1. One of us will pop out and start doing Model 1 stuff. And the rest of us have to rally around them and say, dude, we love you. You're doing the thing. We need you to come back over to the side of the light. Come away from the dark side and return to the light and do it in a calm, curious, empathic manner and practice it even. And that's what I would want to sell a senior executive team on, is the incredible importance of that as the foundation of the rest of what they're going to do. So they wanted to have lean or problem solving or a learning organization be how they go forward together.
So would you, I'm going to make a supposition that if the same outside help, we'll call it consultants, what have you, professors, get brought into, I'm going to oversimplify it, a Model 2 dominant organization with a Model 2 thinking, behaving CEO, and like the lean success rate would be higher in an organization that, because I'm sure there are Model 2 organizations that don't know anything about lean and practices and methods and A3 problems.
But they're still,
but they are Model 2 people by nurture or nature or organizational.
Yes, the strong founder who embodies it and insists on it, and everyone eventually absorbs it so strongly that it just sticks.
So it doesn't seem like a wild guess that lean success rates would be higher in a Model 2 organization.
I think that our claim about cause and effect would require that to be true.
Do either of you have a sense, or do you know, is there data of like what percentage of organizations might even be categorized as mostly?
I haven't found a source for that yet. And oh my gosh, am I looking forward to finding something.
Because if I've heard some people talk about like consultants and if they're good at what they do, not to make this all about consulting, but what was we talk about? So consultants play a role usually in sparking and helping and educating and pushing. But, I've heard some people say, because they're very successful, because they're very busy, they get to very carefully pick and choose their clients. And those organizations are probably better served, given a choice, to use an organization where the executives are at least wanting, they might not be quote unquote perfectly modeled to, but if there's a gap, they acknowledge it and it starts with them. And those organizations, those consultants are going to be more successful, which helps you get more work, or you be more selective.
So many of my clients succeed with lean.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you cherry picked them. I mean, it ain't dumb to take the projects you're most likely to succeed with. And I get that.
Helping organizations go from good to great, if you will, to steal the Judy Collins phrase there, taking, I don't know, like being a tutor. Do you want to tutor a B student to help them become an A student? Or do you want to tutor the student who's lucky to earn D minuses because they don't show up to school, or he's only oversimple the spectrum?
I sense that there's a point behind your point, Horace.
There might be. No, but I'm just kind of thinking through this question of, the quote unquote lean failure rates. I've seen, part of my point, there's a bunch of different ideas bouncing around in my head, but one is these consultants that are very successful, and I don't begrudge them that. I've been part of teams that had a very successful track record going back to days at Johnson & Johnson, because there was methodology and, pick your clients carefully. But some of these consultants, I think, fall into the trap of, well, because I've been super successful, everyone else is doing it wrong. Which might not be the right model analysis. That might be model one kind of thinking. But you articulated. We're the only ones who do this right.
I think it's fundamental attribution error, I think is the technical term for that. When other people fail, it's because of their character. And when I fail, it's because of special circumstances.
Yeah.
But when I succeed, it's because of my character. That's classic human foible. And speaking as a consultant, I am not immune to that. Although I try to have countermeasures.
Are the more powerful countermeasures about better finding the model 2 people that you can work with, or getting more successful at trying to influence the model 1? Because again, like a lot of those model 1 leaders, by definition of that model 1, are probably not going to be real super self-reflective about, you want to hear transformational leaders, John Toussaint and others over time, who kind of came around to see, hey, I'm looking in the mirror and the problem starts with me. Not everybody has that humility and or strength to say that, yet alone mean it. Right.
Well, I think that being able to, as a consultant in the wild, being able to find the client who already has some model 2 behavior embedded in it is certainly helpful. It's probably the easiest road, but I also think at some point in time, you're going to run out of that, right? You're going to run out of those types of clients, and you're going to have to face the fact that I have to be able to go into an organization that's fundamentally model 1 and convert them, or at least get them on the road to conversion to model 2. Obviously there's some prerequisites to that. They have to want to change or have to see the value, et cetera, because, we're all the hyenas trying to eat the same zebra at some point, and we can't all be going after the model 2s. And, certainly Mark, in your career and my career has been very much the same. I have worked with D- companies that ticked all the boxes otherwise. They had the burning platform. They wanted to make the change. The senior leadership was engaged, quotation marks, and they had the money to want to do it. And it's not till you get in there that you realize, oh my goodness, that executive leadership really wants somebody else to do this. They have no intention of changing how they think or anything that they want to do. And to Thomas's point, if we don't have that psychological safety that is part of really that lean formula, we are never going to get this to work. And so we could look at other consultants that have had success in the marketplace, and not to disparage anybody, but my question would be, how many of them, once they've left those companies, have sustained results? Or have they gone back into their Model 1 once they weren't being poked consistently about making sure that they were following their Model 2 behaviors? I don't have any data on that. That's just me speaking kind of rhetorically. Certainly I'm working with a client here on the West Coast, Salem Health. I'm very fortunate that, when I started here, the CEO at the time was definitely Model 2. The current CEO is definitely Model 2, has influenced their executive team to be Model 2. It's not perfect every day, same as it wasn't perfect every day at Toyota either, but they're certainly wanting to do the right thing and trying to change the behavior to create that environment. And so I think having the material to be able to work with to convert is certainly going to be the key thing. And I also wonder how many consultants out in the wild even understand. Certainly until I started talking to Thomas, I certainly didn't understand clearly the Model 1, Model 2, and what that meant. Because if I had understood that, I would have done a much better job engaging that executive team up front in some of the other transformation work that I've taken on. And it would have been a lot less laborious because we could have made a decision that, yes, this is an absolute A rank and we're going to go, or this is going to be a complete waste of time for everybody and we're going to stop.
So to recap, Andre said, I don't want to disparage anybody, but he called consultants hyenas. Thank you.
Well, we're all trying to eat the same zebra, man.
But I'm so sorry to poke at you, my friend. But
That's okay.
the more serious point I was going to bring up is, I mean, there is that dimension of like, well, given a choice, you want to pick and choose clients that are going to be, fun and engaging and interesting to work with. And we want to make a difference. And I think a lot of us do want to make a difference for our economies, for an industry, for a society. And that means figuring out how to deal with the Model 1 organization.
I will take a stab at that. And that is, I think everybody has Model 1 and Model 2 in them all the time. We're all capable of both. And when we're not under extreme pressure, it's easier to get into Model 2 because you're not feeling the pressure, right? Your amygdala is like clamoring, like, oh, we got to get safe. Because scared people do stupid stuff. There's not a single strength that anybody has that doesn't get turned into a self-defeating pattern as soon as their fear grabs the wheel. And so I think that maybe the path forward is, speaking as a consultant, make this the first part of the sale and say, look, I can only work with you successfully if you guys are willing to commit yourselves to a Model 2 transformation at the top. And that's going to be the first part of the engagement is a training, let's say a neuroplastic training like positive intelligence, which is the one that I use, which is to be followed by an agreement that this is the way we will operate. And the greater the pressure we're under, the more we're going to be deliberate about staying calm, curious, and empathic. And there's techniques for that. And if they're not willing to tackle that as the first part of the project, maybe you say, there's really it's not ethical for me to take your money and go through a big song and dance, pretending to teach stuff that you're just going to sabotage as soon as you get scared.
Yeah. I mean, it's a different but related A3 if we were framing it in terms of I am a consultant and I have limited time in my year and in my life, and help me better filter out or choose clients. And, I think you talk about contributing factors and, we're going to run out of time and not be able to give this all justice, but the people who talk on contributing factors, I'm going to paraphrase. There's a couple of these bullet points that I think are in a category of like, sometimes people talk a good game, faking behaviors, or they're saying the things they think they should say, but they don't.
We need commitment. I'm committed, he said defensively. It proves I'm not.
It wasn't the fake lean.
But, sometimes, employees choosing a company to work for, consultants choosing a client, sometimes feel misled. Well, you said change starts with you, but when push comes to shove, boy, you really didn't mean that at all.
And the person saying it may be saying it in an angry, defensive way as well. So you got Model 1 from one person calling up Model 1 from the other. And it's just saboteurs all the way down.
Yeah.
Everybody gets to self-sabotage now.
Yeah. One question I was going to ask, are you willing to share in some form, whether it's read only or a way people can comment and interact, share at least this draft as it stands for people?
Yes. In fact, we've set up a page. Jim Prinzing and I have a page on our website, txl-lab.com/lean. And if you go to that page, you can download the PDF of the current version of the A3 for free. Just click the thumbnail. And then we're setting up a little like two field form where you can give us your name and add email, and we'll make you a contributor to the Google Doc that is the live version of the A3.
Yeah.
So you can make suggestions there that way.
Yeah.
And we'd love for folks to do. I'll add a third thing. You've come up with a simple assessment that anybody who has visibility into the C-suite could fill out to assess how close that C-suite is and where their gaps are.
Yeah.
So it's a diagnostic to try to give you. It's not like it's not a binary, right? It's all degrees. Yeah. And so what the assessment tries to do is tease out how close that C-suite is and where they need to get even better in order to have the preconditions in place that they need to succeed at lean.
Yeah. So I hope people, there'll be a link in the show notes. Go check out the A3 as it stands. The way as it stands is here. We're recording on June 4th, might be released a couple of weeks afterwards when you're listening to this. There is that on the website, and as Thomas mentioned, the live document. But going through proposed countermeasures, evidence this works, implementation path, confirmation of effect, how would you confirm, and then reflections and next steps. We spent most of our discussion mainly on the left-hand side of the A3. We get a gold star for that, I hope.
I think, yeah, staying in problem space is absolutely appropriate.
Mm-hmm. But maybe later this summer, we come back and maybe, as you're continuing to think about this and talk to people and get input from others, who would maybe do a part 2 that focuses more on the right-hand side?
Absolutely. I'll absolutely make myself available for that, because this is very important work.
Great. We'll go ahead and wrap up the episode here. A lot of food for thought. People can also add comments on the blog post for this episode, and let us know what your thoughts are. I'm going to share the episode on LinkedIn, see if we can prompt some discussion there. So again, our guests today, Thomas Cox, Andre DeMarchant, thank you for taking on this challenge. Really, when you reached out to me about this, I think the connections with psychological safety and Deming, and I am not real familiar. I am going to go do a lot of reading. Chris Argyris, and I always feel like I'm not saying his name correctly. Argyris.
If it's Argyris, that's going to sound like Arduous, and then I just say Argyris because computation software gets it right when I call it that. And I'm sorry to him and his family if I'm mispronouncing their last name.
I am being very prompted and pulled now into reading more of his work, and I know it's influenced a lot of people. And let's continue pulling together different influences from, that's why I loved hearing about your background, Andre, and your background, Thomas, and these different influences. We can kind of look at this problem through different lenses. And I think that's why, John Strick says it takes 2 to A3, but you can also, you can have more involved.
Absolutely.
So I'll leave either one or both of you. Is there anything that you want to say, just kind of wrap things up from your perspective?
Andre?
No, just Mark, thank you for the opportunity to present the information. It feels to Thomas and I that there's a bit of a breakthrough in there. Certainly there is for me, and I've been doing this type of work for more than a couple of decades. Thanks for the opportunity, and of course, as always, it's great to see you again.
Great to see you. I love your glasses, by the way. For people that are just listening, you cannot see those. Those are some very cool glasses.
Thank you.
I'll add one thing, and that is, if we can figure out how to get lean to succeed more often, it will lead to such better workplaces and such an improvement for society, separate from the process improvements and the efficiency improvements and the societal physical wealth improvements that would result. There'd be psychological improvements where people wouldn't hate going to work. And oh my gosh, that is so worth doing. Please, if you had even a thought of helping with this, act on that impulse, please. Help us take its next step.
Well, thank you both for sharing, and thank you for that invitation. to others for input. So again, Thomas, Andre, thanks so much. Look forward to seeing you before too long.
Excellent. Thank you.